Hey Tim, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great, David. I'm ready to discuss, debate, and dare I say,
Change the world.
change the world.
I'm just gonna get right into it because I'm jazzed already because we decided on a topic and we've not actively debated in our disagreements for quite a while because we're trying to explore from different perspectives many topics. But this one I think really gets to the core, or will get to the core of a fundamental disagreement. So why don't you lead us in with the topic today?
Sure. Well, today we're going to talk about the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, as its acronym is being used on social media. And CHAZ is a 6-block zone in Seattle where basically protesters and community members have kicked the government out. They said, you know what, we're done with you. We're going to look after ourselves. And within the first 24 hours, one of the leaders was accused of abuse and admitted to being a serial abuser, and said there's no reform for her. And she said she's going to take her own life peacefully because she can't be redeemed. Then we had this hip hop artist named Raz Simone declare himself and his posse basically the police, and almost immediately get accused of being brutalizing a graffiti artist. There's video of this you can find online. And so I just thought it was interesting that they got rid of a government to create an autonomous zone, and a de facto government emerged within the first 24 hours that was full of sexual predation, police brutality, and corruption. New government, same as the old government. And it made me wonder, okay, is government inevitable? Is something got to fill that power vacuum? The takeaway here, I think, for libertarians and especially anarcho-capitalists is that it's not as simple as simply getting rid of the government, because there's always going to be some strong man that will assert their authority and call themselves the government. I mean, eventually what you could imagine happening here is this rapper Raz Simone, and you watch the video, and this guy obviously cares about his community. Okay, he's not just out there. He doesn't look like he has bad intentions. Like he's just out there power tripping, let's say, and trying to be like, let's get all these hoes, and like the typical rap video where the guy's like, give me your money, dog, and like, whatever. That's kind of how he's being portrayed. But if you look at the video, it's like he sees this kid basically vandalizing a building, right, with graffiti. And he's like, hey, dude, I mean, don't do that, okay? Like, this is our community and yada, yada. And the kid's like, F you. And like, I'm going to keep, and no, this isn't cool, man. Finally, he's like, come on. And he kind of like tries to gently, but the kid's like, no. And so pretty soon, it's like a conflict. And I guess it ended with Raz Simone like beating the guy up. And I don't know. It was messy, right?
Mhm.
So now let's imagine Raz is in this situation. Let's ascribe to him all the best intentions in the world. He just wants his community to be peaceful. He's tired of brutality in his community, and now he's like, people are going to take over. This is the people now. But someone's got to take care of these graffiti art and these people that are causing mayhem and vandalizing and doing bad things. And they're not listening to me just nicely talk. So now I'm going to have to use force. But oh shoot, I went overboard with the use of force. It turns out, I think I saw that Raz had posted that it ended in hugs. Like, apparently he apologized to the kid afterwards. They hugged it out. The kid's dad has talked to Raz about being a mentor for this kid or something like that. But still, okay, he went over the line, broke the kid's glasses, kicked him in the head, brutalized him, just like the police are accused of being brutes, basically, right? And so now, if I'm Raz, and I want to promote peace in this zone, what I would do is create maybe a more formal system of rule, right? Where, okay, I need to write down what all the rules are for this autonomous zone. So, because we can't have people obviously doing things like stealing vegetables out of the garden, which apparently the homeless just ravaged the garden. So now a lot of these people are hungry. And we can't have people defacing property in our community. And so here's the list of rules. Before you know it, what you have is exactly what existed before. A system of dispute resolution that looks like courts, police, something that looks very similar to the American government, because that's the culture he grew up in. So I imagine, it's going to look fairly similar to that. So this is where my mind went on this. It's like, okay, how do we limit government if this is our culture, if what emerges as soon as you take it away is just another government that's the same as the old one?
So I would say that it doesn't necessarily emerge. Like, I think to the degree that people are rational, a government would start to emerge and they would try to organize. But I don't want to go down that track. I want to instead posit something to you. So in the anarcho-capitalist utopia, right, there's this CHAZ zone, and it's not just this one rapper who has his set of rules, but there's a second person who comes up with their set of rules. So now there's rapper A and rapper B, the two guys ruling CHAZ. And
so two different nations.
No, it's one nation with a free market of police force, of
Right.
rule of law, right?
Yes.
But it's a free market of it. So 30% of CHAZ picks rapper A, and they think these rules make sense. I want these guys to do what I want. Like, I want these guys to protect my stuff. I think these rules make sense. Right. And the other 70%, they say, oh, no, rapper B is better. Let me pick him. And so now you have two groups, but it's within one area that, okay, as long as the 70% interact, they've all agreed to the same set of rules. They've all hired the same company. But what happens when there's a dispute between rapper B and rapper A, right? What happens when the kid is from rapper B's group and he's vandalizing rapper A's property? And so what happens then is rapper A says, hey, you're breaking my rules. I've agreed to protect the property to this degree, and I respond even based on my explicit rules. But then rapper B says, no, whoa, you went overboard, and now I need to, based on my rule set, respond accordingly. And so the whole idea is that anytime these two interact in a disagreement, what is the arbiter other than force, if they have explicitly separate rules and no common agreement? And so that is what anarcho-capitalism would be. Yeah. And so how would that be solved? Because you're saying that, okay, you don't think it works well with one person, and I'd argue it would work worse with two, or with the option of a free market of this sort of thing.
Right. You think that one corporation having a monopoly in this particular case is going to work preferable to competing organizations?
I don't even think that's, no, I mean, I understand the implications of how you're explaining it, but I think the implications are wrong, right? Because what is a free market? A free market is a market free of force. It's a contradiction to claim that you should have a market of force free of force. It's literally impossible to have a free market of force, because a free market is a market free of force.
Well, I mean, I look at this as, essentially security, crime, investigation, justice, protection of property. These are, so the question is, in that marketplace, if I'm looking for those things on the marketplace and I want to make sure that I have access to justice and that I have access to protection of my property and restitution.
But who decides what justice is?
Do I want an organization that is going to escalate things, that isn't going to be able to cooperate with other agencies? I mean, you can make the same argument, I guess, about like Bell and TELUS, right? Like, how can we have different?
Who decides what justice is? Because look, CHAZ is anarchy, let's say. Sure. And you're for anarchy. And so,
who decides what justice is in your system?
The government. That is the role.
Right. Well, right. But they're just people. So
they're people whose explicit job is to think about and decide what justice is based on a democratic process, right? People vote to decide who are the people who are
And
We
where did they
believe
get the right to become government from?
from the people who elect them. But my whole point is,
Right. So the people that elected them also have the right to become government then. So why can't
no, but
we have
they've
competing?
agreed to, they've literally agreed that the best way to have proper justice is
Right.
to pick some people to really decide and implement these rules, right? And so the whole idea, so CHAZ
Yeah, but if
is,
I don't like the guy you hired or you agreed to, then I hire someone else. So I don't get what the
right, and
difference
then
is
we
between
just
an
have,
anarcho-capitalist society is and an objectivist society. I got to be
there,
honest with you.
you think there can be multiple competing governments, and that
Well,
is,
there are
and
right now, right? I mean, that's what
no,
we have in the world
there's
right now.
parties that compete to be the, no, within a designated area that says,
Okay, so
like,
geographically, you're saying within a geographic region,
right, with
a
it, like,
specified
and the people,
geographic
and
reason.
within a specified geographic
Sure.
region, there is only one government who has one set of rules. And so it's
Right. And
not
it
this
has to be
idea that,
tied to geography.
yeah, because that's that's where your property is, that's where you're living your life, and then you can know physical boundaries is like, that's what CHAZ is doing as well. You set physical boundaries. That's the way to make it objectively known to anyone. If you cross this line, you're now following my rules, right?
Yeah,
If I
I
go
think
into
there's
Tim's house, I'm following Tim's rules. You can't enforce your rules on the kid at the store at the Walmart. But if there's a shitty little kid in your living room, you have the right to enforce your rules, because there needs to be an objective line of, these are the rules in this area. If you want to come to this
right.
area, these are the rules.
But who gets to decide who what those rules are, I guess, right? So I mean, I would prefer it to be a private
Well,
property owner. So I could
well,
see something like a city state being compatible with
but the
anarcho-capitalism. So
whole idea in objectivism is that these rules are not decided, they're discovered, right? They are
okay,
truths about the nature of humans. And so you actually have to understand, what is a human, how
sure.
do they function, how do they achieve happiness, and what things need to be implemented in society for that to happen. That's it, that's all. So it's a science of discovery of
Okay, but how
what.
do we discover which people should be in government? Like, how does that process of discovery work? Who gets to be the people that get to impose the rules, let's say?
I don't understand your question. You
Well,
don't
there are going to
discover
be,
that. You decide. Like, you can vote. So far, it seems that democracy is the best option for that. You vote and select the people who are dedicated to this aspect of science.
oh, yeah, I mean, I it seems like a self-detonating thing, detonating thing. Like, what is it about voting that allows that person to provide services for me? Or, why can't I just decide, okay, I don't want your rule? I mean, the relationship has to
Well,
be
you can
voluntary.
move. No, the whole idea is that there needs
But
to
I don't
be.
want to move. This is my property. I homesteaded it. I hacked it out of the wilderness. This is my property. Now we
And
have this.
but your property, what does it even mean to have property? It means according to some sort of, property is not an intrinsic thing. Property is an idea, right? So property is
Discovered
an,
in nature through natural law, right? I mean, we
right,
discover these principles,
right. And so
first
ownership is an
appropriation, that
idea.
sort of
And so
thing.
you have to have some sort of, if you just go into the wild and there's savages who don't speak any language, you can't say to them, oh, but this is my property, get off. Right?
No,
You,
but we can defend it and we can be ethical and moral in our defense, and we can say that they're unethical and
right.
immoral in their violation of it.
And so then you decide, do I want to live in a society where I can be ethical and moral in my defense, but I have to always be fighting people who don't understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Or do I
I'll
want
hire a
to,
security company or a government if I want,
you
right?
can hire, yeah. And I'm saying, if you hire a security company, that's what anarcho-capitalism would be about. And then when someone else has a
And
different
how would that
security
be
company,
different than a government?
because let me finish.
Okay.
You're on your property, you hire your security company, and another security company and another person, they want some of your property. How do you then mediate that? What is the basis of mediation between that person trying to get your property with their free market security team, and you have your free market security team? What is the means of reconciliation other than you think you're right and you can fight them to defend it? And the whole idea is that is what happens between countries, right?
Right.
But that doesn't have to be. And but what happens in a government,
and that's also what happens in countries too, especially through government predation, right?
no, I mean, there's huge problems with how the government works now, right? It does way more than it should do. But the whole idea is, instead of saying, oh, you know what, I need to hire people and defend my land from aggressors, I actually want to agree with the 10 people in my area. What are the fundamental rules we want to live by for our interaction with each other, such that our security forces can unite into one larger security force? And then we'll set specific, explicit rules if we have a dispute, and we'll let them decide. And so the whole idea is that
that would be anarcho-capitalist.
No,
right?
that
because
is
it's
literally
completely voluntary. If it's voluntary, it's anarcho-capitalist. You have to have the right to secede from a government, correct? Like, am I wrong here?
What do you like secede?
Like secede,
you think
in
CHAZ
that
is perfectly valid?
I don't want to pay for that anymore. I'm done with your services.
So there'd be no mandatory payment
on
of the government in an objective.
Right.
Like, it would all be voluntary payment.
Okay.
But the whole idea is, no, you can't be in the middle of New York City and claim this square block of New York City now doesn't follow the American laws.
No, there's property, right? And I mean, ultimately everything would be privately owned. So if I want to drive on the roads, I would have to be, there would have to be a third party arbiter, because if I had a dispute with the road owner, if the road owner didn't want me on there, there's going to have to be an arbiter there. So that you're calling that a government, I'm calling it a dispute resolution organization. You have the right to secede, but seceding from that basically just means that you're now quarantined to your property because everything else is privately owned. So you can't interact with society anymore at this point. But I think ultimately, just let me clarify this with you. Your government, or what you're calling a government, is a voluntary arrangement. Isn't that right?
It depends what you mean by voluntary.
Well, it's voluntary in the sense that we have a contract. I mean, I can secede. I don't have to be with them, right? I mean, voluntary arrangements mean that I can leave the relationship.
No, but there's no secession, because it's a group saying these are the rules, right? So you can't just secede
of interacting in the group.
Right. So you can't.
So I can secede from that group.
Yeah. But so then but you're not actually seceding. You're I don't like this term of secession. It makes it seem like you're just choosing to not do anything. You're like, you have the right to do nothing. Sure. If you do nothing, then you don't have to follow the rules of how to interact with other people. But that's not secession, right? And you, on your private property, still can't bring people onto your property and break fundamental rules, right? Whereas secession would have that implication, that you have the right in your property to murder people. If you why not? If you have a different rule set, you're not part of the government. You're not buying into this group's law.
No, I mean, I think you'd agree ethics exists whether there's a government or not, right? So murder would still be wrong. So you don't have a right that doesn't exist in nature.
No, but murder would be wrong. But what would happen to you? If you secede and you don't hire, let's say in an anarcho-capitalist world, I'm in New York City and I secede and I murder someone on my property who came to my property voluntarily.
Yeah, that would still be a crime, right?
A crime according to who? Not my rules.
Natural law. According to natural law, right?
No, crime is not according to natural law. Immorality is, but crime is a concept.
Well, okay.
But so that's what I'm saying. It falls apart
Well,
because
no, I think it's a crime whether there's a government or not. I mean, we could be on the moon where there's no government and you kill me. And to me, I would consider that a criminal act,
no, but I mean,
even
it's
if there's no
immoral.
government there.
No, but see, you're totally using crime wrong. It was not a crime to kill a Jew in Nazi Germany. It was wrong, but it wasn't a crime,
Okay.
right? It was not a
Right. Okay.
crime.
So yeah,
And
okay. Okay. It's
and
unethical. It's,
right. And so what I'm
we'll go with
saying,
your definition then.
and so what, that's why I don't like
It didn't violate a rule that was written down by a government.
right.
Is a crime is violating that, right? Okay.
Right. And so what I'm asking then is, in this anarcho-capitalist world, you have your property, you secede from the ruling dispute resolution organization, and you either have
Yeah.
none or your own. Someone still from
Right.
their free will chooses to go to your property, and they know that you're not part of this agreed upon rule set, but then you murder them.
Sure.
Right? It's on your property, it's according to your
Right.
rule set, but so then by your rules, they should not be prosecuted because you're a nation of one. The same way,
No,
if I,
that's not true.
so who prosecutes you and by what right?
No.
Who
Well,
can,
you have the right to, you have the right to punish, to bring to justice people that have killed, that have murdered.
but not, what if they're not part of my dispute resolution organization?
Doesn't matter that you have that right, whether you're underneath a government's control or not.
But so
I
you're
mean,
then
these
claiming
exist
that
absent
it's
of government. These rights.
no, so rights do exist absence of government, but the whole idea,
Right.
like, so then you can't secede. You can't opt out of my rule set that says murder is wrong. And you can't hire a
No, not
DR.
unless you can hide from me, I guess. Yeah.
No, but so then you can't hire a
Right.
DRO that
Yeah.
says
I mean,
murder is acceptable.
here's the thing: you can't have an anarcho-capitalist society unless you have a tipping point of a population in a geography that subscribe to the non-aggression principle, right? Respect to property rights, don't initiate force,
Right.
all the objectivist rules, right?
And then when there's two DROs who disagree
Yeah.
at a fundamental level about whether
disagree on what they can't disagree. Remember, they can't disagree on the non-initiation of force.
No, but they
disagree
can
on all those ethical things. They might have a disagreement on how to get justice, how the application is.
And is this a subversion of the non-aggression principle or not? And there's a disagreement between the two. How is that reconciled?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean,
and the
I would
answer
imagine
is it cannot be. The answer is if
no,
there's two.
Of course it can be. Of course it can be. I mean, stuff like that happens all the time, right? You have two lawyers who have a different. Let's use family law as an example, right? Where you're in a divorce, it's heated. Each side wants something, and they have a fundamental disagreement. But yet they come to some kind of arbitration. They hire a third party, someone that's respected by both sides, and they battle it out in front of that arbitrator. And they, before they go into it, they agree that the arbitrator will rule. So that doesn't need to be a government arbitrator. That can be someone they hire.
Sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. And they keep disputing, and they have to go to court. Sure. And they say this person has the right to decide what we will do. And I'm saying what happens, and that is forced upon them if they cannot come to a decision, especially about something criminal.
They agree to that in advance. I mean, in a anarcho-capitalist society, if you want to interact in society, you basically have to subscribe to something that basically acts like a government, right? Now,
but when the two governments disagree,
so that's going to be a regular occurrence, right? And so one of the things we know in a marketplace is that we want to have the quickest way to resolve these disputes with justice, correct? So if one dispute resolution organization starts using violence and says we're just going to manhandle our way, I mean, have you read any Rothbard or any of the or David Friedman or any of the people that address these arguments?
No, because I think
about historical examples of it.
Have you actually read any Rand firsthand? Have you actually read the objectivist arguments as to the epistemology and the
Sure.
morality.
Yeah, and I think they logically conclude with Rothbard. You know, I think Rothbard is a better objectivist. Like, I think he takes them to the
But
most
you
logical
still have
conclusions.
not answered. You literally just keep saying that if these two governments disagree, they will come to a conclusion. And that's also assuming
The
that
market will provide, bro.
no, that doesn't
No,
mean that's meaningless.
because you have to understand incentives here. The incentives are peaceful. People are not going to want violent resolutions to these things, right? They're not going to want
No one in the world,
overpowering another.
no one will want that. There's no bad people in the world. No one will want
Well, of
violence.
course. So, I mean, the worst case scenario here is that one of these things turns into a government, right? I mean,
No.
I think this is essentially how governments form.
No, not at all. The worst thing is that there are DROs, there are groups that get run by thugs, active thugs. As bad as governments are, the premise is that it's built upon people trying to institute laws properly, right? But there's no guarantee of that. And that's happened to governments before. And you have to limit government's power significantly so they don't have the ability to run over with that.
And the best way to limit it is to have some competition, right? For these things, because I mean, ultimately in this kind of environment,
competition has to be designated by explicit physical boundaries. This is the rule set for this area.
Private property boundaries.
But not
property boundaries. Those are the boundaries.
No, but
right?
not.
So you violate a road owner's rules. Road owner has a dispute with that. I mean, you have to, if you want to resolve that dispute, you have to work it out with the road owner. You have to maybe go to court and plead your case.
Whose court? Who runs the court? You have DRO A, I have DRO B.
Yeah.
Who runs the court?
Exactly. So, yeah. So, I mean, this is what happens with insurance companies right now. They go to, you have to find a third party arbitrator, right? And so all these things in theory would be worked out ahead of time. It's like, okay, because these are predictable things, right? Okay, so you hire an arbitrator and the arbitrator rules and says basically, and the arbitrators that are the most just get the wealthiest.
Right. And then,
right. And the ones who are the least just get run out of business to go bankrupt.
And then you decide, oh no, you actually still disagree with the arbitrator's decision. You really do deserve that thing. You fundamentally disagree, and you're going to just decide to take it. And what prevents that from happening?
Well, the protection company, the DRO, right?
And then you have a literal war between your DRO and my DRO. That's what I'm saying.
Because DROs don't want to go to war over someone who's acting irrationally, who's not abiding by judgments, right? So let's say
yours wouldn't if you ran one, and mine wouldn't if I ran one. But there are people who would take it, who would be able to create DROs. If there's no set rules that is enforced upon the DROs of what is acceptable, who says that a DRO has to say murder is wrong? Who makes the DROs have to have that in their rule set?
But having a government doesn't solve that problem. You understand that, right?
Literally does.
Who opposes the rules? Who opposes the rules on the government? What's to stop a government from doing exactly what you claim a DRO is going to do?
No, the whole idea is a government is literally the thing that is designed to try to prevent that from happening. That is literally
that's what a DRO's job is too.
No, but you're saying that there can be two in one area. If there's two in one area and they disagree,
they're essentially insurance companies.
But if they have access to as much weaponry as
initiation of force, right?
We're not going to get anywhere. I think you're literally just refusing to understand the point at this point. I think because you're still not answering my question. You're not answering the question.
Okay, what's the question?
The question is, because every time I ask you the question, your claim is just, oh no, that's what government does anyways. Okay. And we can get to actual proper government. If there are two DROs that fundamentally disagree and cannot reconcile, and one wants to enact its view of justice in the situation by force, what prevents it from doing that?
Well, okay, so you have an arbitrator. He issues a ruling. there's a binding contract from both DROs that they'll abide by whatever the ruling is, because that would be done ahead of time, right? And so you're saying one of the DROs
breaks that
decides they're
contract.
just going to unilaterally break the contract.
Yeah,
right?
because that happens.
Okay, well,
people break contracts.
Right. So then, that I can imagine all sorts of market mechanisms that would deal with that, but certainly other DROs would have the right to use force to get restitution, to ensure that they just like a bank that doesn't abide by contracts would soon go out of business. I imagine that DRO would go out of business because it's not honoring its contracts, so it would lose money very quickly. And this is preferable to me than a government that doesn't honor its contracts, because there's no way a government can go out of business because it just exerts its power unilaterally.
Okay, so you 30% answered my question, which is good, because you said, okay, they'll eventually go out of business, but literally what will they do? What they will do is, if they unilaterally decide to break a contract at the most fundamental level, and they have the right to use force in their view, and your DRO has the right to use force in their view, they can go to war. They can fight about it, literally. And that is the fundamental thing that government is created to prevent, is saying, no, we're going to abstract that out.
Understand,
so
this is also what DROs are designed to prevent too. They're designed to prevent that very thing. This is why you don't give them the power of central banking. Why, like, no one wants to pay a defense company and cut checks to it so it can go to war with someone else.
You're wars used to be quite profitable. Wars used to be quite profitable. You're saying that you don't think anyone would be in favor of the investment of robbing Jeff Bezos? No one would be interested in that? That's a profitable activity.
Presumably he'd be fairly well defended. That would be a pretty costly.
But I'm just saying, you're building in these assumptions that, yes, if literally everyone was rational, then this would theoretically work. But not everyone is rational, and even more than that, people are evil. There are evil, bad people in the world. I don't think people generally are.
I guess this is where we're kind of at loggerheads, because I see the same thing and say this is why we can't have government, because people fundamentally aren't rational. And so if you give them an institution that has a monopoly on the use of force, a territorial monopoly on the use of force, bad people are going to go into it. You're not going to have any recourse. You're going to be stuck with what you get. And government grows. And history shows that government continues to grow.
See, that's a deterministic viewpoint there. Just because government has grown does not mean it's inevitable that it will grow.
Well, right? The whole I agree. I would like to think that we could limit it.
But
here's how the conversation started. Okay.
The crux of the argument, though, because I'm saying that if we've both said, okay, we admit that not everyone on earth is rational and good, right? And so I'm saying that's why you can't have DROs. And you're saying, well, that's the same reason you can't have our governments. And literally DROs, where anyone technically has the right to access as much weaponry as they want, as long as it's a DRO, that requires 1% of the population to be irrational and evil. And they can create their DRO that has the right to have that weaponry. At least in a democracy, 51% would have to be irrational. So my threshold of how the force wielding power gets access is evil and has access to weaponry, it would need to be 51% of people in a geographical area. Whereas for you, it's 1%. One guy can just have a bunch of weaponry and cause havoc. Whereas we're saying, no, in this area, we know right now that we're rational and good, and we want to keep this type of society. So when and if some irrational bad people come into our society, we're not going to let them cause havoc. We're not going to let them do whatever they want. We're going to think rationally and say, what are the fundamental things that prevent people from negatively impacting our rights? And so that geographical area, the population that can vote would have to shift to 51% bad and irrational. And I grant you that is what's happening in the world. That is what's happening in the world. But that's a much higher threshold than 1% being able to create a DRO that has different rules, that murder is okay. And what right do you have to prevent them from getting weaponry? They've not killed anyone yet. They're just saying, we think murder is okay.
Yeah, I mean, these are all fair points, but I mean, from my perspective, you're making an argument against government because right now, that's exactly what we have. We have 1% of the people with all the weapons. And in fact, they have far more weapons than any private citizen could amass because they have the power of central banking. I mean, the century of all-out war has been the century of central banking. So I don't see how you can limit that.
Well, central banking is not something that's the proper form of government. They should not have that power at all. And for you to claim 1% of the population has all of the weaponry, I think is I don't have the exact term for it, but it's not analogous to the 1% that would have it. Like, it would literally be whoever wants can have as much weaponry as they want. Yeah. Whereas we're saying, there's a specific mechanism for you to get access to this weaponry. Right. So if you want to be in this 1%, if you want to live in our geographical area and you want access to weaponry, you have to run for office. You have to be like, this is the way in which you get access to weaponry. You can't just decide you want access to weaponry. Right. And that's the whole idea, is you abstract force out of the rest of society so that society as a whole is the gatekeeper of who they think is responsible enough to wield force in their area. And they're saying, we're agreeing all of us together to have one process of decision for that, not multiple, because we're uncomfortable with the idea. We don't think it's good if everyone can have their own process of decision making for who can wield force in this area. We want one, and we're going to try as best as possible to have that be rational and correct, that there is one proper process of deciding who wields force.
Yeah, I mean, I will totally agree with you that, what we're seeing in Seattle is an example of what happens if, because I think what we're seeing here is, or what we're imagining is, okay, we're just getting rid of government one day and next day we have these DROs. No, that's obviously not going to happen. People who have access to weapons and have no moral compunction about using those weapons to impose their own rules on everyone else are just going to fill in the gap where government is, and they're going to form a new government. In fact, to me, that's essentially what the definition of government is. And that's what the definition of
anarcho-capitalism is, not what government is. By what right can you claim?
Okay, well, what's your definition of?
But by what right can you claim that those thugs don't have the right to do that? Why don't they? They think that it's fine.
Well, but I mean, just follow objectivist epistemology and you can see why they don't have the right to do that, right?
No, but how do you...
You don't have the right to initiate force against people. You know this.
But how do you implement that? You're saying that
implement what?
You're saying that if it's on their property, they can do it. And they're claiming, well, this is going to be my property.
Yeah, well, I don't know how you implement it. I mean, if I had that answer, we'd be able to limit government, right? Because right now, government is doing exactly what this gang of thugs is doing.
And so I would
but they're doing it on a much bigger scale with much more serious ramifications.
No, so I think it's important that you admitted you don't have the answer, and I think there is not an answer. So if you've read as much as you've read and you've not figured out the answer to that exact question, that objectivism holds there is no answer. That is not possible to do. And because
I mean, it's as impossible as the kind of government that you're describing, where rational people somehow limit the government to this objectivist algorithm, and everything's good. I don't see how that's possible either.
No, but I literally at least have a proposal, right? You're saying, right? Like I'm saying that.
Yeah, but how do we get to that proposal? I mean, you have your ideal.
Look, I have a proposal. This is what it would actually look like. And you're just saying you don't think that would work. I'm asking you, what would
Yeah.
happen? What is
Well,
the
I'm not
solution
just
to
saying that.
this
I'm saying I
problem?
think it's a violation of the principles it's supposedly founded on. I
Right. And
think
I mean,
unless it's, you can say that's a voluntary relationship. If it's a voluntary relationship, then I don't see how it's different than an anarcho-capitalist world, right?
well, this is
Um,
where we got to the last time we talked about this for an hour and a half, is the fundamental difference comes down to what are the rules within designated geographical areas. And
yeah,
fundamentally, you seem to think it's somehow viable to have multiple governments within one designated geographical area.
yeah,
And I
but
think that's
the only
impossible.
geographical areas where it's permissible to even impose rules is on private property. Where else would it be permissible to impose rules?
But the whole idea of what government is people with private property near each other saying, we want to agree now and for
Sure.
forever to a single set of rules and a single mechanism of deciding how to resolve disputes such that we never threaten each other's lives. Because like that's
Yeah.
literally all government is. But it's saying in this area we're all agreeing to one, not that there is a
Yeah.
free market. We're not going to let Joe decide otherwise. If Joe doesn't want
Yeah.
to, we're going to make sure he's not in our country at all. And that is the thing. It's not that he can be in the country and then decide to have different rules, right? But so
No,
fundamentally,
that's
though,
fair. I mean, that's what you're describing there is a private property society where people who don't abide by the, libertarian rules get pushed out because no property owner wants them on their property. No one will sell them property. No one will rent them property. They can't drive on the roads. They're either quarantined to their little piece of property. But again, even that property, if it's in the city, you're going to have to be paying. You will have explicitly agreed to be paying a fee, something like a tax, to maintain roads and infrastructure and stuff that you agree to. So if you don't pay that, you're going to be kicked out anyway. So yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think we're using two different words to mean the same thing. But
and so
my
I think
question was, yeah, go ahead.
I think if we are using two different words, that your word is detrimental to the entire cause of liberty. To claim that anarcho-capitalism and anarchy is somehow good, I think it's then not understanding what government is actually for. So if you think that what we're talking about is the same, I think that is literally the purpose of government. That is what government is supposed to be. It's never been that in the proper sense, but that is what government's supposed to be.
Yeah, I guess we have a different definition of government. To me, government is a group of people that make moral rules for the people um, that they're ruling, and exempt themselves from those rules in a
No,
given
that's
geographical territory. That's what it is. Has been throughout all of history. That's what it is right now.
yes, that
So
is
you're
what,
talking about something that should be, and I agree with you. That's what should be, is what
right.
you describe. If you want to call it a government, I won't quibble. I just think that it's dangerous to call that government and try to legitimize that word, given what it actually means in reality and here and now.
No, but I mean, I think that to drop the word government completely and say that these things that are existing in the world are somehow right, are somehow good in any sense, is wrong. And so the same way Ayn Rand, let's say, reclaims the word selfish and what selfish is supposed to mean. This is what government is supposed to be. And her claim is also that the founding fathers of America had this same idea of government, and there were flaws in the Constitution, but the whole magic of the United States, it wasn't magic, it was reason, that they had this idea of this
Yeah.
is what government should be, but there were flaws and they didn't have the proper moral base as to why that's what government should be. But that, and so we've gotten further from that, and the flaws have been exacerbated, but fundamentally that is what government should be. That's the only moral thing government could be. And I think the leaving it open to this idea of
Sure.
anarcho-capitalism leaves it open and connected to the idea of anarchy. And anarchy is not that. Anarchy is literally the opposite of government and what we're talking about, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree to disagree. I define anarchy as the absence of rulers. And so I think a ruler is someone who initiates force, someone who imposes their will on others without necessary reason.
Right. And so I think
I
that's,
think so.
no, so I think in a proper, and that's a fundamental thing of most people in the world look at there's rulers and there's the ruled. Whereas Ayn Rand says there are traitors, and government has a role to play, and people decide as equals, oh, we're going to
Yes.
have this function. And so there is no ruler. Government is ruled by the people, right? Government is created as something that is ruled. So there are no rulers, but anarchy is having no rules, not no ruler, but no rules.
Well, that's not, anarchy. Archons are rulers and archon is no rulers. So anarchy comes from no rulers. So when I say anarchy, I don't mean no rules. I am a big believer in rules and even using force to enforce those rules. But I think that to me, here's where I see the fundamental difference. I don't want disorder. I don't want lawlessness or rulelessness. I think you agree with me there. We want a third party arbitrating disputes and using force in an objectivist sense properly.
Mm-hmm.
We have different words to describe that goal. I'm triggered by the word government because to me it means chaos, it means thuggery, it means brutality, it means violation of basic rules, ethical rules. And to me, and it sounds like to you that's what anarchy means. So I think we're just using different words to describe the same thing.
Well, and so then
like
I
when
would
you
say,
like from now on, here's what's going to happen in my
is,
mind, David. Whenever you say government, I'm going to hear anarcho-capitalism. And
no, see, it's no.
And
that's
what I want you to do is,
wrong.
I want you to, when I say anarcho-capitalism, I want you to hear government.
No, because no, it's still, that's fundamentally wrong, right? I understand how we almost agree, right? But and so we're both looking at history and saying every time there's been anarchy, it's been miserable. And every time that there's been government, with potentially the exception of the United States for a very short amount of time, it's been terrible, right? So we're both looking at history and saying it's all been shit, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying, oh, but the government shit's been really bad. And I'm saying, oh, the anarchy shit's been really bad. That's looking at the evidence, but being objective is not just looking at the evidence. It's also thinking rationally about the principles. And I'm saying what the principle of government is different than the principle of anarchy. And so if you try and understand which of the principles, what do these two principles mean, and which one in theory will solve the problem, and what evidence is there to validate that this one would prove that this theory is accurate, and which one is this. And I'm saying that even though you're right that government for all of time has been bad, that the actual evidence, when you really look at it, proves that government is the right principle, not anarchy.
We want objective rule of law, and your name for that is government, and my name is something different,
But I'm saying that then you don't understand, like, that is what government is a set of rules in a designated geographical area. That is what objective law is. And the government, the very concept of government as the American founding fathers had it, is that exact thing.
Maybe.
Is an objective, but I mean, that's at least the objectivist position, right? And so I want to be clear that I mean, that's the objectivist position as I understand it. So it's not this idea of an unlimited government or any sort of government that we've ever seen before, right? It's the same claim people make to derail capitalism. Oh, we have capitalism now. No, we've never actually really had capitalism. It was an ideal in the founding of America, and then but it was perverted from the very beginning. And so the American notion of government goes hand in hand with the American notion of laissez-faire
So
capitalism.
what I kind of wanted to get to in this is, we started out with, okay, these
CHAZ,
people, CHAZ, right? And
way
CHAZ,
back 4 hours ago.
the vision of CHAZ. Let's imagine that the vision of CHAZ was to be an objectivist zone, okay,
Yeah,
governed by objectivist law,
yeah. I'm
and
going there right now. Actually, I'm gonna run it.
right. So how do we get to that place, right? How do we, because it's not, what we found is that it's not as simple as kicking out the thugs that were there, the Seattle municipal government and the federal government that are just a criminal gang that we all agree don't follow any objective rule set.
Right.
Now what? We've kicked them out, and now we're starting to see crime, and we're starting to see homeless robbing things. And to me, this is what has been interesting about this case study, is how do we get to that place? Obviously it's not going to work just to, and I've said this for a long time, if I could just snap my fingers and make parliament and government disappear, I don't think that solves any problems. In fact, I think that might make things worse, because ultimately we'd have exactly what we're seeing in CHAZ occur, which is all these criminal gangs emerge and basically become the de facto governments warring with each other.
Right.
So
And
so the solution has to be something that involves morphing the state we're in now into something better. And what I was thinking over the last couple of days is, it has to be, technology has to be the answer here. We have to make government less and less vital in our lives. And then that's it's like a slow revolution that occurs over time as people rely less and less on the services that government provides, and ultimately whittles it down to just the things that we can't get maybe in the market, like, the objectivist night watchman state or something like that, where you have geographical defense and law or something like that. But what are your thoughts?
yeah, well, so there's basically two options, right? In my understanding of the objectivist view, and in my view, so both, there's two options, right? Option one is what you outlined. If you think you're still in a essentially free and essentially rational society, which I do think the US is, I think Canada is, we're trending away from that at a scary rate. But if you think fundamentally that you still have rule of law, you still have democracy, you do that. You try and get elected, and you try and change and shrink the government. And that's not going to happen until you get people to philosophically change their views, right? You have to change the culture to the degree you think that is, if you think that is still possible, right?
Right.
And then we can talk about the steps, like Ayn Rand says, the number one step is deregulation. Taxation is a different thing, and it'll take longer to stop giving handouts. So the first thing you have to do is deregulate as quickly as possible. And then you start dismantling the welfare state and the taxation and stuff. But regulation's much quicker to do, to get rid of. But anyway, so there is that process. And I think I'm still in a society that's functional enough that is the case. The only other option is a revolution. That's what the Americans did, right? They didn't think that was possible, and they fought, and they had their force, and they said, we're getting rid of you, and we're going to stay here and defend our rights till the end. And so at some point, you can look into a dystopic future and say, there will be a set of free market freedom thinkers who have to become freedom fighters again. I don't think that's the case. I think we're trending in that direction, which is really scary. But those are the two options. Either you think you can work within the system, or you have to start preparing for your revolution. I think the systems are still good enough. And when you say that CHAZ has that right now the country doesn't follow objective laws and stuff, I watched a webinar yesterday actually, and the claim, at least by one of the objectivist philosophers, is that when you really look into how courts often function, it still seems like at least the court system in the US is pretty objective still. That they do try and figure out the truth most of the time, that they are aiming at that ideal still, even as Congress isn't, as the executive branch isn't, as the police
Sure.
aren't, as the media aren't. There is still, and so it's really that is what's still upholding the American experiment, let's call it. But it's
Yeah, but it
depending
must be
on,
getting harder because, you know, the laws that they are required to make judgments on are not objective in a lot of cases now, right? So
right,
now,
but the Supreme Court has the ability to, that's what
right.
the
Yeah,
Constitution
the
is
Supreme
for,
Court, yeah.
right? There is, that's like the magic of the US, is that
Right.
they literally sat, the founding fathers created a document that wasn't perfect, but that said, these are the inalienable rules. These can never be
Right.
except through
Government shall
very
not infringe.
right, except for, and if there's a hugely high threshold to change the Constitution, right? I don't remember when the last amendment was, but like, so it is possible, but it's really, you have to get most people in the United States to all agree to something.
Yeah.
So it's not simple by any means, but that the rule of law is supersedes the elected government officials, and that the whole idea is at least the Supreme Court is selected in such a way that these people are actually dedicated to that ideal.
Right.
And so the idea is that that document, you know, I heard somewhere that we shouldn't be so depressed at how far the US has fallen, and that it like disgraced the founding fathers. It's how great of an achievement is it that despite all of the cultural trends, that the US still exists at all, that it even
Yeah.
has some degree of freedom. That's an achievement of the Constitution, and that laws are subordinate to what is right, and what is right is instantiated in the Constitution.
Yeah, it would be interesting. You know, right now there's some talk about what would the rule set be on Mars. So, you know, Elon Musk is talking about colonizing Mars, and there's some talk about, okay, what form of government should be put up there. So,
Mhm.
if what do you think were the weaknesses of the Constitution? What do you think could bulletproof government going forward so that it doesn't stray from its mission?
So that's a very complex question. I don't have the specific answer. And someone actually asked Ayn Rand that once, like, "Oh, does she have the answer?" And she's like, "No, you can't just casually do that, right? It's a very
Right.
complex problem. You know, a bunch of great thinkers worked very hard on it. But the two things that, what's the second one? Um, the main thing, no, so the two main things, sorry, the two main things that were missing is, as far as I understand it, is that there was not explicitly the right to property. So there's that the government cannot infringe upon the property rights of any citizen, something along those lines. So it's life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, not just life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that
Right.
that was apparently left out. That
Yeah.
is in some state constitutions apparently, but it was left out because of the issues with slaves, and that they didn't want to have issues, that like if a slave was seen as property or things like that. Apparently, I don't know. And the second thing is that there was no moral foundation. People didn't understand, and even the founding fathers didn't deeply understand why that was right. They came to the evidence of this is the right type of government based on lots of thinking and lots of observation, and they were historians and they were thinkers, but they couldn't articulate exactly why in reality, based on what facts of reality, this is right. And
Right.
the objectivist view is that that is Ayn Rand's greatest contribution, is that she has a moral defense so that you can actually convince people as to why it is right and not just tell them it is right. And that is what was missing, in terms of grounding it and people actually understanding the country they lived in. Those are the two major things, but I'm sure there are others.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe by then technology will have a solution. You know, maybe AI will be advanced enough that they can just rule us with perfect objectivist rule or something like that.
No,
Hopefully,
there's some quote. It's like technology allows us to institute our values. So first we have to figure out what they are. There's not going to be
right.
a computer that can discover the good um, relative to a human life, right? The whole idea of morality is it's based. I mean, this is I don't know much about this area, so, and we've been running quite long,
Yeah.
but
Well, maybe augmented intelligence then, when I meld with an AI,
or
I'll
you
be
the
able to
neural net,
process
right?
things. Yeah, the
Yeah,
neural net.
if you could process through your
But
brain.
that's actually the third option. So we talked about working within the system. We talked about violent revolution, but a third option might just be that we find a way to exit right where we're at. Um, upload our consciousness to the cloud, whatever it
Well,
is.
no,
There
and
might be technology that
the
it
other option is
emerges
like
that,
it's kind of glorified by some objectivists, is the whole like secession and creating another new country, right? Like
right.
that's what America did. They kind of were in a new world. There was a bunch of untouched land, and they did have
Yeah.
to fight though. But the hope is that maybe, my leading candidates are Saskatchewan and Wyoming, and whatever state connects the two. And you take over Saskatchewan through peaceful means.
Yeah.
You bring industry there. You have enough people move there that you have the majority of the population. You do that in Wyoming, and you do that in whatever state connects the two, and then you vote to secede all three, and you create a new
Right.
country based on these rules.
Yeah, that's happening in New Hampshire right now with the Free State Project. A bunch of
Right. And
libertarians
so
and objectivists are there. Gulch, Chile, another
I saw
example.
that.
But
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah, but apparently the organizers were kind of shady and things kind of fell
Yeah.
apart there.
But
So
so
yeah,
that, I mean, it's a scary time for sure to see how the countries, the US is going, and Canada is kind of just like slowly walking to its death. But there is hope, and I still think that uh, the average person still is rational and still would want to have these ideas if they actually had the time to process it. And so it's really about, I think, the philosophic revolution and getting the right ideas in front of the 80% of people who don't give a shit about any of the political bullshit that's going on. That's my view, at least.
yeah. I mean, that certainly would be helpful. I'm not holding my breath. I'm not deterministic, but I've just seen patterns continually repeat throughout history. I'm not sure what would make us special. Maybe the information highway is going to make it possible. I'm optimistic, but
Well, saying that the information highway would make it possible is also sort of deterministic, right? It's ideas
sure,
that change things. And so, like, the objectivist view is that Ayn Rand made fundamental discoveries
yeah,
about reality that we can put in front of people's minds, and it will change their views, right? And
right,
that's what philosophers do, is uh, they can make
yeah.
those
But now
discoveries.
we
And
can get those ideas out there in a more widespread
right,
way
yeah,
very
and
quickly, right? That's
yeah,
that might be the difference, because I think there have been philosophers throughout history that have had good ideas, but there's been book burnings and burnings of library and repositories of
yeah.
information,
When
and a lot of these ideas have been lost.
it took Aristotle's views, what was it, like, 2000 years or
Yeah,
1500 years to actually take hold in society. Luckily, they like stayed around, right?
yeah. So
So,
so these ideas now, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think that they're going to be there. So maybe that'll be the difference this time. And if it's not, look, we can understanding, having our worldview, we can see these trends coming. We can see what's wrong. We can protect ourselves. We can maybe even um, enrich ourselves in the midst of chaos, by understanding, um, economic ramifications, and where to protect our money and where to invest our money and different things like that. So, uh, even if we're cynical or pessimistic about the state of our governments and our nations, we might be optimistic about coming out all right on the other end.
yeah, I'd agree. And whoever has the ability, we can mail some Ayn Rand to the people in CHAZ, and maybe they can have a successful experiment.
There we go. Yeah, maybe Raz Simone can start an objectivist monarchy and just kind of impose it.
An objectivist monarchy is a contradiction.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Wouldn't an objectivist
Thanks, Tim.
democracy be a contradiction too, though?
No, no. It's all about rule of law, like government ruled by men, not men ruled by.
So what difference would it? What difference would it make whether a king was enforcing those rules or whether someone that was elected was enforcing those rules?
Because it's how the rules are it's about how are the rules formed, right? This is, again, we should end this. We've been it's literally about how are the rules formed, right? That's the fundamental.
Here's what I'd like you to read. I'd like you to read Hans Hermann Hoppe, Democracy, the God That Failed, and tell me what you think about it.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
All right.